Imagine you are one of the most powerful bankers in Switzerland. You run one of the oldest, most prestigious financial institutions on Earth, a bank that has survived wars, depressions, and global crises for over 160 years. Your name is synonymous with wealth and discretion. Then one morning, you step outside your front door and notice something strange. A man. Watching you, following you through the streets of Zurich. You report it to your employer. You expect them to take it seriously. Instead, what follows is one of the most embarrassing corporate espionage scandals in modern banking history, a secret surveillance operation so poorly executed, so shockingly reckless that it would eventually contribute to the collapse of an institution worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So here is the question that haunts this entire story. How does a bank that survived the Great Depression and 2 world wars destroy itself by spying on its own people? Credit Suisse was not just a bank. It was a symbol. Founded in 1856, it helped finance the Swiss railway system and grew into a global titan with over $500 billion in managed assets. Its name carried weight in every financial capital on Earth, but beneath the marble lobbies and the carefully pressed suits, something had been rotting for years. A culture of paranoia. A leadership obsessed with control. And when that paranoia finally boiled over in 2019, it did not stay quiet. It exploded in the most public, humiliating way imaginable, and the shockwaves it sent through the institution would never truly stop. This is the story of the spy scandal that cracked Credit Suisse wide open, and the slow collapse that followed. The man they could not let leave. In 2019, Iqbal Khan was Credit Suisse's star. As head of international wealth management, he had built a reputation as charming, driven, and brilliantly connected. He was the kind of executive clients flew across continents to meet. He was also, by most accounts, a genuine threat to the ambitions of Credit Suisse CEO Tidjane Thiam, a man who had his own vision for the bank's future, and perhaps less room for rivals who outshone him. When Khan announced he was leaving Credit Suisse to join arch-competitor UBS, alarm bells rang at the top of the organization. The fear was straightforward but profound. Khan knew everything. The clients, the strategies, the relationships. And now he was walking out the door straight into the arms of the competition. Someone decided that was unacceptable. Someone decided to watch him. The spies who could not hide. What followed was almost unbelievable in its incompetence. Credit Suisse hired private investigators to surveil Iqbal Khan in the streets of Zurich to track his movements, monitor who he met with, and determine whether he was poaching clients or colleagues before he had even formally started his new job. But these were not professionals operating in the shadows. They were spotted almost immediately. Khan noticed the tail, confronted the men following him, and the situation escalated into a physical altercation on a public street. The police were called. Zurich, a city where the powerful have always conducted their affairs behind closed doors, suddenly had a full-blown corporate spy incident playing out in broad daylight. The story leaked. And when it did, Credit Suisse' carefully curated image of sophistication and trustworthiness began to crumble in real time. The executive who took the fall and the questions that remained. Credit Suisse Chief Operating Officer Pierre-Olivier Bou resigned and took personal responsibility for authorizing the surveillance. The bank insisted CEO Tidjane Thiam had no knowledge of the operation. Thiam gave an emotional press conference. He called it a painful situation. He said he had been deeply shocked, but not everyone believed him. Board members quietly pushed back. Institutional investors asked uncomfortable questions. How does a surveillance operation involving private investigators, multiple handlers, and street-level tracking happen inside one of the world's largest banks without the CEO knowing? The Swiss financial regulator launched an investigation. What they found was not reassuring. Credit Suisse had conducted not one covert surveillance operation, but multiple. The bank had monitored at least one other departing executive using the same methods. This was not a single rogue decision. This was a pattern. TM ultimately resigned in February 2020, officially due to the board losing confidence, though the bank never quite admitted that directly. But the damage was not confined to leadership shuffles and regulatory fines. Something deeper had broken. When trust becomes a liability. In the financial world, reputation is not just important, it is the product. Clients do not deposit fortunes with institutions they do not trust. And after the spy scandal, trust in Credit Suisse began bleeding away in ways that no press release could stop. The years that followed brought crisis after crisis. The bank lost billions in the Archegos capital collapse of 2021. It was left exposed and humiliated by the Greensill capital implosion. Thousands of accounts were frozen. Investigations multiplied across multiple countries. Each new disaster fed a narrative that had been seeded by the surveillance scandal that Credit Suisse was an institution where judgment had failed at the very top. In March 2023, Credit Suisse collapsed. After a catastrophic loss of confidence triggered a bank run, Swiss authorities orchestrated an emergency takeover by rival UBS for just over $3 billion, a fraction of what the bank had once been worth. 167 years of history absorbed over a single frantic weekend. And here is what makes that ending so striking. The spy scandal alone did not kill Credit Suisse. But it revealed something the financial world could not unsee. It showed that the people running one of the planet's most powerful banks were willing to deploy private investigators against their own colleagues, that they prioritized control over integrity, that when confronted, they pointed fingers and offered resignations rather than real answers. The rot had been there long before Iqbal Khan noticed a stranger following him down a Zurich street. The surveillance operation did not create the crisis. It simply turned on the lights. There is a lesson buried inside the wreckage of Credit Suisse, one that goes far beyond banking. Institutions do not collapse because of a single bad decision. They collapse because a culture of bad decisions is allowed to persist, hidden behind prestige and power and the assumption that an institution too important to fail is also too important to question. Credit Suisse spent 167 years building something extraordinary. And in the end, what undid it was not a financial crisis or a market crash. It was the moment a man looked over his shoulder on a Zurich street, saw someone watching him, and refused to stay silent. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a powerful institution can face is someone who simply decides to look back.